Welcome in, Warchant TV. Always a great pleasure to join you guys and talk a little Florida State football, shall we? Before we get started, remember, as always, to like and subscribe to Warchant TV. That way, obviously, you get the latest of these videos and anything else that we produce. Also find there on warchant.com. So like and subscribe. Should mention right off the bat, we're doing the top 40 countdown. We're now down to the nitty-gritty boys. We're in the top 10. You see Ira, you see Corey. I'm Jeff. Thank you so much for watching once again. And remember, always give you an explanation at the start of these things, the criteria for the top 40 based on the potential impact for this season, not what they're going to be as a pro, not what they're going to be 3 years from now, the impact that they'll have on this year's team and how we think that'll play out. So without further ado, let's get through these guys right off the bat. And I say get through these guys, but let's start at number 10, Robert Scott, offensive lineman. Ira, I'll start with you. I think I had Robert Scott pretty low compared to you two guys. I had him, I think, at 18. Obviously, he's a starting offensive lineman. He's a player that's very important. If you're a starter, that's the case. I think Robert's got a long way to go to reach the potential. You guys obviously think a little bit more of him than I do in the sense that probably this is that year then. I'll let you start with Robert Scott.
I mean, I think it's a combination of two things. Number one is he is your starting left tackle. And I don't know that they've got a lot of other options that are slam dunks to step in just as well as he could. And I also think last year, I thought he looked better as he got healthier. I thought early in the year, I thought he had an ankle. Seemed like it was bothering him, and I think that affected him. Now, he didn't do well against the top defensive ends that they went against. Obviously, nobody on the offensive line did real well against Clemson's front or Miami's front or Florida's front maybe. But I think, again, he is going into now, I think, the third or fourth year in the program. He's a lot more experienced. He's gotten bigger and stronger. And he's your starting left tackle. So I don't necessarily think he's the next Walter Jones by any stretch. But I think he's more than I think he's suitable, maybe to more than suitable for Florida State right now.
Yeah, and he's an affable, fun kid to root for, too, Corey. This is a kid that we love to talk to and is fun and a hard worker. And I would want him and need him. They need him to take that big step forward.
Yeah, and he's a big personality for sure. He's a bigger kid than he was last year. That's always nice. These kids keep getting bigger and stronger. And, yeah, look, man, he's still eligibility-wise, he's just a sophomore. He's a redshirt sophomore. He's already got 18 starts. That's a lot of starts for a kid that's still going into a sophomore season. That's nuts. And he's one of many on the offensive line that have a lot of starts. But, yeah, like Ira said, I think I had him 9 or 10, like right around this range. And a lot of it is because that's a really important position. And when Jordan Travis gets hurt, it's not typically when he's running. It's like when he takes off and runs, it's something that happens in the pocket. You need to protect that guy's backside. We all understand the importance of that position. And he was adequate last year. We hope he takes the big step. And if he takes a pretty good step, that's a really important guy on this football team.
Well, I don't disagree with either one of you about the importance of the position. And this is that balancing act that we do, right? Because you just said he's an adequate player. And, Ira said, well, he's going to be your starting left tackle. It's almost like default that he has to be in this top 10 because the importance of the role that he plays. But in terms of overall ability, I do think he's just adequate. And he can take that step forward this year. I think you make a great point about how relatively young he is with all that experience. Yeah. And offensive linemen take time to get to the kind of strength that you need to dominate big defensive ends and defensive tackles. So there's a chance he takes that big league forward. I'm rooting for him. I think he's a great kid. And I certainly always root for guys who work really hard, and he seems to be committed in that way. Dillan Gibbons, another offensive lineman, comes in at number 9. Dillan Gibbons, I had at 15. I think Dillan Gibbons, I probably had him ranked too low. I'll just say that. I think he was Florida State's best offensive lineman last year. Corey, I'm going to stay with you and then go to Ira afterwards. But Dillan Gibbons obviously is a kid that once he got in shape last year, and I think that was about midway through the season, frankly, or maybe 4 or 5 games in, it really changed the complexion of Florida State's offensive line. This is a guy that gets out and pulls and can really move for his size. Came into camp, we all thought in the spring, and looked the best he's looked. I'm excited about the impact he'll have on the team this year. I'll start with you, Dillan Gibbons, on another offensive lineman.
Yeah, no, he was good last year. He was their best offensive lineman, I thought. And I don't know when the season started if they even knew he was going to have another year that he'd be around in 2022. But he is. He's here. It's great for them. I don't know if they thought that was a 1-year rental last year or not, but it wasn't. It's been a 2-year rental. And to have him back, Yeah, he's good. I think he was an honorable mention All ACC guy, which is the highest honor anybody on that team got last year for the offensive line. And I think the experience, you're talking about guys 23 years old. The experience you get from a guy like that, I just think, again, that can't be overstated how much that means to have a guy that's good, a guy that knows what he's doing. He's an anchor. You know where he's going to be this year. He's not going to be moving around like some of these other guys. He's straight at that guard spot, and what he can do, just talent-wise, physically, and the experience, man. That's a big deal to have a guy like that on your offensive line.
And I'll say this, and again, we're talking about Dillan Gibbons, number 9 on our list here for the Warchant top 40, the original top 40. I'll say this, even after he got in better shape, he still dealt with injuries, and he was still their best offensive lineman.
Right. And real quick, before I just want to tidy up one little bow on Robert Scott. I just want to have the last word. It wasn't only because of the left tackle position. It also is, I think there's a big drop-off if he couldn't play. So that's also why. But all right, go back to Dillan Gibbons. Yeah, I think the other thing about him that's really important is he's got an edge to him. He's one of those guys. I was talking to Alex Atkins recently because I'm doing a story on Dillan Gibbons that'll be up on the site probably next week. He's one of those guys that plays till maybe the second or third echo of the whistle. Now, it's bitten him a few times. He's gotten a couple late hit penalties. He's got to get that under control. But you need some edge on an offensive line, and he brings that. This is a group that really hasn't had that. We go back to that Louisville game, a few years ago where they got curb stomped up at Louisville, and Louisville's players are just taunting FSU's players, and nobody's stepping up. Florida State's offensive line hasn't had much nastiness, and I think it's something that those guys are learning from him. So I think that's a big piece of it as well. And to your point, just the fact that he played through those games. There were weeks last year, we're at practice, but we're not at liberty to necessarily discuss injuries. There were weeks where I was like, okay, there's no way that guy is playing football this Saturday. And then he was out there on Saturday, and he was, if not their best, one of their best offensive linemen. So that's another piece of it as well.
We move on to Jared Verse. I have him down outside of the top 15. You guys both have him in the top 10 easily. Obviously, where he sits on our list here is 8, and I don't doubt that Jared Verse can have a big impact on this team this year. I just have question marks how in year 1 he fits and how consistently he'll be the guy out there for them. This is an athlete. This is a guy that's learning. This is a guy who's taking a huge leap in competition. Love his body type, love his energy, love his work ethic, love all those things. He's a little raw for me. Ira, I'll come back to you here. I know you have Jared Verse really high on your list. Talk about your reasoning as to what you looked at when you ranked him as high as you did.
Yeah, I think I might have had him at 3. I am definitely in the top 5. Here's the thing. I think it's just a classic discussion or debate over are you going to put guys out there who know exactly what they're supposed to do all the time in every situation, aren't going to get fooled, aren't going to get tricked, and will do every assignment right, but maybe not is dynamic, or do you give more reps to the guy who is more dynamic? And I think that's the battle they're going to have to face. I think Dennis Briggs, if you want 2 guys who are going to do what they're supposed to do, Dennis Briggs and Derek McClendon have been in this system for a long time. They've been coached by John Papuchis and Odell Higgins for several years. They know what they're supposed to do, and they'll do a good job. But, man, you guys were at practices. There's nobody on that team with the athleticism and combination of size as Jared Verse. So I think even if he's like a Brian Burns as a freshman, who just has 9.5 sacks by accident, by running around, I still think that's a huge impact. I just don't have any doubt he's going to lead them in sacks, and I think he's going to be their top pass rusher. There are going to be growing pains, though, like you said. He's not going to be a Jermaine Johnson who steps in right away as a polished player.
Yeah, and it's unfair, Corey, if there's no way that the fan base can look at this kid and say, well, he should do something akin to Jermaine Johnson. That was a grown man. He played a lot of football, come out of the SEC, had experienced the competition. His body was fully developed. He was ready to go and lead. Jared Verse is a good leader. I think where I had him lower is that when I interviewed him, and I enjoyed talking to him, and I talked to him on and off the record for that interview, he did admit that his head was swimming a little bit. Now, he obviously is very confident, but he talked about how, well, I had to learn how to place my hands. I wasn't technically sound. I'm learning a lot already, and I have to be a little bit more disciplined and consistent with my assignments. So that's to Ira's point. So I think there's a lot in the air. I just worried that learning curve might last half a season, and he might not have as big an impact, certainly as you guys think he is. I hope I'm wrong. Talk about your reasoning with Jared Verse's ranking. I think you had him at 7.
Yeah, I think mainly, man, number one, like Ira said, all the things Ira said about him being, there's nobody out there like him. And
Right.
he is a freak physically. He's just a freak physically. And what I liked about him, and I didn't know it was in there, was how, I don't know, man, how he's not the nicest dude on the practice field.
He's got some what for him.
He's got a lot of what for in him. And he's talking smack to the whole offensive line to the point I don't think the offensive players like him that much. But I think that's a good thing. Like, nobody liked Jalen Ramsey or LaMarcus Joyner in practice either when they were on the offensive side. I didn't know that. I thought he might just be one of these, like, these guys built in a lab that don't even really care about football. He's a physical freak, so I'm going to go play. I developed better than I thought I was going to be, so I don't need to be at Albany, but I don't love the sport. I'm just this freak that can go around these offensive linemen. No, man, he's a football player. And so I think, there's going to be some struggles because, like you said, Jermaine Johnson was at Georgia for 2 years. That's a whole different ballgame than being at Albany. But I think he likes the sport so much. He loves the competition of it. He's very competitive. To go along with that physical freakness, that's a word, right, guys? Freakness?
I think freakosity.
With the physical freakosity that he has, that's what intrigues me. That's what excites me the most about that dude is the mindset. Not the speed and the hips and the rush and all that, which is impressive. It's that mindset, man.
Keeping with, I guess, the theme of how excited we are about a new player who's coming in and their potential, we get to number 7 on this list, and we all kind of agree on this one. We're all right there. Tatum Bethune coming in. Ira, you're excited? Okay, good. I thought you were going to say no. Yeah, Tatum Bethune at linebacker came in and kind of in the beginning just quietly blended in, seemed very, very comfortable. Obviously, for those that don't know, he was incredibly productive already at UCF. This is a sideline-to-sideline guy. He gets it. It's a wonderful combination of size and speed. He can cover. He's a pretty complete linebacker is the point I'm getting at, and I think that's why all of us came away from spring practice pretty wowed and cemented in our minds, well, there's your leader on defense. There's the leader at the linebacker position. And Florida State, frankly, has been missing that for a long time. I think they got him a good one right now. Corey, I'll go with you. Start with Tatum Bethune. Florida State hasn't had really dependable, consistent linebacker play in some time.
Yeah, and the reason I ranked him high, obviously he had 108 tackles last year. I think he had like 57 tackles in 10 games the year before at Central Florida. He had a couple games of 15 and 16 tackles. Yeah, they don't have that kind of stuff. So he's one of those linebackers. We all know it. They just have a knack for the football. They have a knack for finding the ball and getting the guy who has the football on the ground. But what his impact really is going to be, to me, is what it's doing to his entire position group. Like, it makes, now you knock Kalen DeLoach down to your number 2 linebacker. Well, that's a pretty darn good number 2 linebacker, man. That guy at the end of the last season was a good football player. Then you have Amari Gaynor and you have DJ Lundy in there too. I just think he's going to make everybody better. He makes that whole position group better. And if there's one position on this entire football team that had to take a big step up, we all know it was linebacker. And I think what DeLoach did at the end of last year, combined with getting one of the better linebackers in the entire portal to come play for you, and a guy that's produced at this level, I think you can't overstate how important that is to this defense.
It's interesting, like when Corey just laid out the depth chart there, thinking about how one guy alters the way you think about 4 guys and how quickly that changes with his presence. Because, I mean, when you make DeLoach the 2, Corey's exactly right. DeLoach was a good player in the second half of last season, really a complete player in the second half of last season. And now you don't make DJ Lundy have to be on the field in positions that really he's not suited to excel in, such as coverage. Now, you can pick and choose how you put Amari Gaynor out there and how you use DJ Lundy. Everybody's better because of Tatum Bethune.
Yeah, and you watch, I agree 100%, but when you watch defenses play and a running back hits a hole and there's nobody there and they run for 12, 15 yards, whatever it is, and people will automatically yell at the defensive coordinator. And I get it. And it looks like your defense isn't sound. But when you watch what happens when a Tatum Bethune comes out there, and we saw it this spring, where he reads the play, he's in the hole, he makes the play, and you say, okay, that's what a linebacker is supposed to look like. And I agree. I like Kalen DeLoach a lot. I like some of these young guys that they have, but Tatum Bethune is what you want in a college football linebacker, and I think it's a huge upgrade. I mean, I think he's going to be the best linebacker they've had since going back to the great teams in the early 2000 teens, the 2013 era Florida State football. I just think he's a very productive, intuitive, smart football player. The other thing I think he adds that I think is a wild card is he's a great communicator on the field. And remember, I think the first time we interviewed him, he made a comment about how I'm going to be talking on the field until the ball is snapped. And we were like, does he mean trash talking, or no, he means communicating. And you see it on the field. He is constantly communicating with the defensive lineman in front of him, the linebackers to the side, the defensive backs, making sure everybody's on the same page. Not every kid is like that. Even great football players a lot of times don't have that just communicative skill. He has that, and I think it's going to elevate everybody else.
Yeah, it's born out of confidence and an understanding and a lot of experience. So there's a guy that knows what he's talking about, and he knows that. And he knows this group that could use his wisdom, his leadership, his physicality. I think we're all excited about him. Big Coop is a guy I can't wait to talk about now at number 6 as we round out 6 through 10 here, coming up on the top 5. So make sure you're paying attention. We'll drop the top 5 real soon here, and we'll get into some of those players on the next edition of Warchant TV and the Top 40 Countdown. But for now, Big Coop is a guy that's been here for a long time, been very, very productive, affable, fun-loving, hardworking, a monster in the middle. And by the way, when he decides to turn up the energy and really go, that's a guy that this offensive line could not block in the spring. Now, again, with guys that size, you're not always able to sustain that play in and play out. But I think he's trying to get paid. I think Coop knows this is it, right? Here's your chance. And he played great in the spring. And every time I watch him, when it's go time and he knows it's a serious situation, he dominates the guy across from him. I think he's going to have a huge year. I think he's an all-ACC type guy this year for sure. I think he's a guy that will be talked about every Saturday. Ira, I'll start with you with Big Coop.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes if we undervalue him a little bit because of the personality. He is so likable. And because, like you said, there have been times where he's had to be out there maybe 10 or 20 snaps more than he needed to be because they didn't have the depth that they needed to have. He might be the better defensive tackle. I mean, we all love Fabian Lovett, and I think the common seems like the common opinion for most people is that Lovett is the more NFL type defensive tackle and the bigger talent. I'm not sure, man. I think Robert Cooper has potential to be a star, and I think the key is, as you said, flipping that switch to where, look, man, you don't need to pace yourself. We're only going to put you out there for 45 plays or whatever it is, so you can go full out every single play. And I think then maybe he becomes a dominant player, not Vince Wilfork or something like that. But I mean, I think he could be a dominant, big space occupier, but also a guy who makes plays in the backfield. And I'm excited to see what he does this year because I think he came back for a reason.
Ira, you could have just said Corey Simon. We don't have to be referencing Canes or something over here.
The body type had me.
Goodness gracious.
Matthew, edit that out.
All right, let's talk about Robert Cooper, Corey.
Yeah, so when I wrote the top whatever this is 6 through 10 on the website, he's played 44 games in his career already.
Yeah,
that's crazy. So if he stays healthy this year, he's going to play 56 or 57 games, which I think is a record that will never be broken at Florida State. That's an incredible number of college football games. And I think I had him the lowest out of anybody that did it. I had him at 12, and I really like Robert Cooper a lot. The only reason I had him a little lower is, like Ira said, I think his sweet spot is about 35 to 45 snaps. So maybe in some of these games, that'll be half the game. So I just didn't put him in the top 10 just because I don't know if he'll be playing half the game. And I don't think he's a guy you necessarily need in there on third down when it's 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 12 and they're passing. I think that's the difference between him and Lovett. But what he does when he's healthy and he's got the energy, and hopefully he will because they have more depth at defensive tackle this year. Yeah. He's kind of unblockable in the sense that he's not unblockable where he's just going to get to the quarterback and put him on his back. But he's winning those battles almost all the time. He's either pushing the guys back near the quarterback or in a running play, he's holding up those blocks so the linebackers can make the play, or he's making the play himself. He is not a guy that gets pushed off his spot, hardly ever. And that's a big deal. Now he's got 44 games under his belt. He's a big dude. He's experienced. It's his money year. You think he's as good as he was last year. It's time to take another big step up. And if he does that, yeah, man, that's all ACC type material if he can stay on the field.
I think he will take a big step forward. I thought he came into spring in the best shape of his life. Now, listen, he's never going to be considered a runaway model. He doesn't need to be. He's a defensive tackle. He's a big, big man, but he plays low.
He's like a Vince Wilfork. Yeah, he's like a Vince Wilfork maybe, or Jordan Davis.
I think he's going to play more snaps this year because I think he's in the best shape of his life. I think he's hungry. It's a good problem to have for Florida State if we're sitting around here debating he and Fabian Lovett, right? These are two. The interior is solid. You're feeling really good about this right about now. Don't forget, again, top 5 coming up. Like and subscribe to Warchant TV. Check out the latest stories on this top 40 and everything else that's going on as we get set for the ACC kickoff in Charlotte here real soon. Practice begins this month, so you're going to want to take it over to warchant.com. A lot of stories, a lot of video. Don't forget Wake Up Warchant and the Jeff Cameron Show, and, of course, Seminole Headlines. So we've got a ton going on here at Warchant. Thanks so much for watching. For Ira Schafel and Corey Clark, our thanks to Matthew for directing. Be well, everybody. We'll talk to you again real soon.